Nick, a lot of anxiety-inducing headlines about the Omicron variant in the past week or two. We have been toughening up our international travel restrictions, trying to keep this variant from spreading. What about our border with the U.S.? How do Canadians feel about that these days?
Well, Canadians have a fixation, a compulsion, an utter focus on the border. It's because 90% of the population lives within a 1 hour drive of the US border. And, what's interesting is just this week, the government introduced more stringent rules for travel, not just across the border, but within Canada for I'll call it an absolute proof of vaccination to travel. But, the thing is what's interesting is that Canadians are cross-pressured on this. In polling that we've done, and we do a lot of polling on border issues and perceptions of health threats and security threats and stuff like that. In research that we did earlier this year, when we asked Canadians, and then we also asked Americans, we did a survey of Americans and Canadians and asked them where the greatest health threat was. Interestingly, if you ask Canadians, the top health threat was in Canada and in the United States perceived of as being China. But when we ask about each other, we get some really interesting results. 30% of Canadians believe that the greatest health threat to Canada is actually the United States. The kicker is ask an American, and only 5% of Americans think that Canada is the greatest health threat to America. So that's
Wow.
only 1 out of every 20, which means there's a bit of an asymmetrical view here, where when Canadians think of the US, there's a significant proportion see the US as a threat to the health and as a health threat, but that Canada is not really on the radar in America as a health threat. Probably explains why the Americans want to open things up. If they were looking at polling like this, they'd say, hey, no one thinks that Canada is a problem from a health perspective. Let's open up that border and get people moving across it. But for Canadians, there's still 3 out of every 10 that think that the US represents a health threat to Canada.
That's fascinating. Nick, do you think are we looking at pressure from the Americans to keep the border open this time around as the Omicron variant spreads?
Well, I think the Americans want to keep the border open. And I think, we need to keep the border open. First of all, we need to say that because it's very important for the economy to keep the border functioning well. But I think what this puts into spotlight is that as we keep the border functioning to keep the economy going, it's going to be probably more important for the Canadian government to explain how this open border will work and what will be in place in order to protect Canadians. So this is not about closing the border. This is just about a greater burden on the Canadian government, at least, to explain how the border will work and how the Canadian government will minimize health threats from outside in terms of the movement of people.